Welcome to the 12th edition of ThinkTalks at AmityOnline. Today the topic of discussion is e-banking and the transformation of it when blockchain is involved. Today we are joined by two very eminent people in the industry. Deepak Talwar works on cybersecurity. He's the director of cybersecurity at Ernst & Young. And Nikhil Joy, he works for Zest Money, a lending platform. So really, in front of us, as we look at technologies changing and the world changing, what we really need to see is what's happening to how we're going to do business in the future. How is money going to be transacted? And the idea is to kind of understand the transformation. So Deepak, let me start by asking you, what's really happening to traditional banking the way we saw it maybe a decade ago, when people moved to mobile phones and e-wallets and things like that? And what are we looking at now?
So thank you. It's changing. We use the word disruption so frequently in today's world, but let's go back. In a decade back or 20 years back, the way we see it is, I see myself in a bank, a physical bank, big cabins, areas where we used to have been in a queue. You start banking, getting into checks, being in line, and getting into it. Sweat, time, money. So many things keeps going on, right? And that's how we do the traditional banking. One of the way to look into it, right? Lending, the processes, all those are on manuals. Nothing called as go green. Go digital. It is more to do with the paper, right? The way we see the consumers, the way we see the value of time, the way we see the technology is evolving and disruptions, we move slowly. Mobile is too far compared to what has happened in between. We moved to the systems, the computers, we got into e-banking, and it was both sides. You acknowledge it also, you learn it, you unlearn things and start again. But the more the individuals, the consumers, the corporates see the value, the chain got increased. And that's where today every individual, you go from a college grads to and corporates to the governments, on an average we can say they at least have minimum 1 or 2 or maybe around 4 gadgets. One of them can be a full banking. I do not go anywhere, I do entire banking from a small piece of gadget, right? And then I'm also worried in terms of everything is secure or not. That's another piece from where we come from, a cybersecurity. But yes, that's how I see it.
So, we were having that discussion with a gentleman this morning, and what he talked about was that he'd done one transaction on his mobile wallet, or it wasn't a mobile wallet, it was with a bank.
Yes.
And all of a sudden 4 transactions happened on that phone or on that bank account, and he lost a lot of money. We're talking about cybersecurity. At the same time, we're talking about the ability of technologies to transform as we move forward, because when banks become smarter, so do thieves become smarter. Tell me the journey that really banking needs to take as we move forward.
So, as we're moving forward, there are a lot of technologies that are coming in, and it is, we should take it with a pinch of salt. So, as you rightly pointed out, as technology is getting more faster and making transactions more secure, the people who are misusing this technology are also getting smarter. So now that most of banking as we know it has moved from a retail setup where you go to an actual bank. Now it has moved to your mobile phone, so you have to be more careful, and the standards of security that have to be implemented in these devices have to be more robust. So as we move forward, we just need to be more wary. That is where I think better standards from the government on factors like cybersecurity have to be implemented and put in place.
So you run a company which does e-lending.
Yes, yes.
Explain to us in your own systems, how are you looking at the future? What's going to happen that is going to make it more secure for you? What are the changes you're looking at?
So at Zest Money, we've sort of embraced these new emerging technologies like machine learning and artificial intelligence. So if you look at our risk team, we have a risk team of 5 people, essentially doing the same work that a traditional bank's risk team is doing, but we're achieving this at much greater efficiencies, at much higher speed, by leveraging some of these technologies like machine learning. So our risk algorithm can churn out, take in input and churn out a decision in a matter of seconds, right? As opposed to the traditional systems where documents need to be verified, where it goes through certain steps. And we're also looking into very interesting technologies like blockchain. I mean, we feel that, you know, blockchain can possibly change lending as we know it completely. And some of the examples are smart contracts, where when a borrower takes a money, at that point he is signing himself to a single source of truth that these are the repercussions if I default, that if I don't repay. So I think some of these technologies can completely transform the way we look at these industries.
You know, when you talk about blockchain, you can almost not talk about cryptocurrencies. It's just the reality. Blockchain came into place because of cryptocurrencies. And now that the technology is in place, we're talking about, you know, using it in other parts, but we cannot forget why it came in, and we cannot detach it from cryptocurrencies because it's attached to revenue, it's attached to money, and it's attached to being able to take money out of it. Explain to me, how is cryptocurrencies or blockchain aligned to India's, you know, push forward of this government? The government has taken a lot of great steps towards digitizing India. How aligned is it, or is it unaligned? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, let's hold for a minute on a technology first. As we say, when you start something, the way we spoke about the banking and traditional, similarly, blockchain ideally is a backbone. It's a technology, and trust me, this blockchain technology can evolve, can universally reshape the way we are doing transactions. That's one way of looking into it. The time the transaction came in, that's where the cryptocurrency came in. So from a layman terms, it's more like a cryptocurrency is a medium and blockchain is a technology. Just to move one step forward, Bitcoin is an example of a cryptocurrency, and we all agree the way we see, you know, dollar versus INR, the process, the way it is happening, and then we see, wow, the values are pretty high. So that's one part of understanding of you know, technology of blockchain. The second part of blockchain is also it's a distributed infrastructure, right? It's not centralized. That's how we call it as a blocks, the way it is, and they talk. So if we take the other side of technology versus the reality of acknowledgement, yes. Are we in a learning phase? Yes. Is it more to do with India versus the global? Every region, every country have their own adoption rate and the pace of adopting it. India is in a learning mode. Sometimes it goes in favor, like, you know, say, oh, Bitcoin, is it good to go, not to say legal or illegal, or can we transact on that currency? First of all, every cryptocurrency cannot be on the transaction. That's one way of looking into it. Second, how we are evolving our banking, how the government initiatives are aligned to the agendas to take that digital transaction to next level, the way any other countries are taking in, right? And then we see the threat side of it as well. So yes, there is a huge amount of scope because of the type of technology when we acknowledged it, and then seeing the scope whether it is absorbed in digital India as a framework, or in terms of make in India, or the processes we are doing. Everything is e-based, right? E-transactions, digital. It's secure as well. When we say blockchain, let me tell you, when we are talking about it, the alteration of data is not so easy, right? The way to hook into when the transactions are happening between the blocks, everything is digitally stamped, signed. So when we look more in terms of learning and find out that yes, it is pretty better, artificial intelligence, machine learning brings analytics, it is better, then it is. Government doing so much of digitization, so much of transactions, so much of initiatives, they need to align it in terms of the profitability. At the same time, the risk can be catered, but we should not be the last one, Rohit.
Sure.
We can't be saying that we are the last one to adopt because we have our own risk and compliance to look into. We need to look into, but we just cannot say that disruptions is not part of it.
Sure.
Otherwise, same like banking, we might be delayed and say, hey, you know what, From the world's perspective, we have a little delayed banking, but still we are acknowledging the same technologies.
Right.
Moving to cloud, the world is moving to cloud.
Right. So let's talk a bit more about your specific area. You worked in semantic for many years, and then you obviously, you manage Ernst & Young's practice on cybersecurity. Is blockchain a far more secure technology, or is it a less secure technology than what we see being used across platforms?
So we are in a not in a mature stage to say what all can be done, but from a learning stage of today's that how it has been evolved, right, as a blockchain technology. As I said, first of all, as I said, it's a distributed infrastructure, the way it is, the blocks, the values, the purples. Yes, it definitely cannot have that ease of flow. For example, we were talking about OTP, and you get a transaction, and second OTP does not, although these things have changed, evolved, you don't need even those, right? But end of the day, the transaction fraudulent activities happen. When we talk about these scenarios with this artificial intelligence analytics, and when we also bring in the blockchain as a technology base, definitely from a today's standpoint, it is secure. It is secure, it is actually more secure. And the reasons is because of the way it behaves. As I told you, when you are doing a block talks to the another block, you just can't. I am doing a lot of times we say denial of services, right? DDoS attacks, multiple attacks where you get into the fraudulent in between managing the transactions. But that chain, the way it has been evolving, right? And when you get into those contents, it's not easy to tamper. It's not easy to get into. It will be rejected. So it's a watch and piece by piece game, right? Though they are talking. And then it knows where it starts. The way we see WhatsApp and you forwards it. Today you don't know who is the source, and you get to know something, a creative idea, or it is a fake, we don't know. But the time you get more legitimate, more source oriented, it works. So it knows the historical things. That's how it is secure. How we adopt it, time will tell. We also need to understand in the same era where we are living, the way we call ethical hacking, there is hacking also there. They are also becoming digital. Underground economy is also becoming digital. So keeping that in mind, right, definitely you have to balance it, look into it. It's an area of adoption. It is an area of concern, but it is surely going to be an enhanced security.
Everybody across the platform, not just banking. Today we are talking more about banking, but all areas are looking at blockchain and looking at it and saying, how can we use to verify content? Even news in the future is going to be using blockchain to verify who created this content, who owns this content, and how do we move forward. But in your specific area, can you take an example and kind of break it down for us and say, okay, this is how blockchain is going to work in your specific area? Just break it down for us.
Essentially, in the space that we are in lending, there are certain parameters. One, you need to be absolutely sure of the identity of the people involved, and by that I mean the borrowers. So blockchain in a sense ensures this, because this information is available to all the stakeholders involved. So it could be the lender on one side, it could be the credit bureaus on one side, it could be the regulators on one side, right? So by design, by having a distributed ledger, it has a single source of truth which is available for all the stakeholders involved. So that is one aspect that is taken care of just by design of blockchain. And I briefly touched upon this earlier, smart contracts. So typically in lending, what happens is when a borrower gets into a lending relationship with a lender, there is a loan agreement that they enter into. So blockchain essentially enforces it, not just facilitates the loan agreement or the contract, it even enforces it, goes one step beyond. So which kind of safeguards the interest of the lender on one side, while on the other side ensuring that there is actual intent on the part of the borrower as well, right? And again, all of these result in lower costs, faster processing, which is again in the interest of all the stakeholders involved. Again, coming back to the point that we were discussing earlier, this ties in perfectly with the government's vision also of a digital India, where what is the ultimate goal of digitizing? It is to lower costs, to increase the speed of processing, and I think it ties perfectly with that vision.
But there are some countries that have shown opposition. There has been some opposition also from within India right now. But let's look at other countries that have shown opposition, like China, who don't want to, yet adopt. But there are others, like the United States, like Japan, Singapore, that, have embraced it, said, let's get on with it. Explain to me why those countries are still looking at it being a problematic technology.
It's a larger topic, larger thoughts to look into it. Some of the contributions which we can think, the way we see the technology and the adoptions. So the way adoption happens is also how far you have already reached, right? One of the business leaders among Indian leaders, I think you might have learned this statement saying, data is the new oil, right? So the way we see the value of oil, data is another oil, right? So data becomes very critical the way it is, how data is being flowing across the world, how information is flowing across the world. And then we talk about the new technologies are going to take over and disruption has to be adopted as well. And every disruption, every change, the way we say, is a pain, right? Not to say specifically in terms of the US or the Singapore or Japan, every organizations within that countries or the government initiatives go as per how they have been already being settled into it. Coming back to India, if we talk about versus the governance at other places, we see a lot of times regulations, compliance, risk plays a lot of role. It might be in the European countries where say more of a data. You might have heard of a name called GDPR out of this context, right? But the reason I'm bringing that is it's all about the citizens of European to have that impact and control of their data. I need to take a consent from you, Rohit, before I send an email to you. From the time the way we see GDPR, people were not aware about. Is it really important? It depends on what communication way we are doing it and how we are doing it. How should I be acknowledging and I'm supposed to send an email to promote? If it's a mail to promote something and you don't want it and you have not given a consent, right? This is just a consumer side of looking into on the consent, and now it has become a corporate and governance, and I'm sure in an Indian context you will see a GDPR as well, which is there. Coming back to the topic, how the adoption you are saying, there is a risk. There is a risk in terms of the weakening of the power of the dollars, the weakening of the INRs versus the cryptocurrency, the pace at which these currencies need to float around in the market. It needs to be looked into. With those parameters, yes, definitely it's a transactional time to look into it. But from an adoption perspective, we have been into a lot of banking discussions. One of the key things we have seen it is the time it takes to do a single transaction. And the saving we can do in that single transaction is going to change the way they do it, right? Blockchain is going to improve it. So there is a change.
I was reading something around the UK banks. They're talking about bringing down costs tremendously for the consumer using blockchains. And when people look at blockchains, as long as the technology is understood and the governments are willing and are ready to change and take the right journey, countries like India obviously are, stand ahead because India is massively digitized. Most people are using currencies on the banking system rather than cash economies. So countries like India seem to be ready. Do you think India will be able to transition fast or faster?
So Rohit, interesting point. I mean, there is widespread adoption of digital currencies or digital banking channels, but I would say we're still far from it reaching the masses, right? And right now there is a whole apprehension around cryptocurrencies and the uncertainties around it. But what we need to understand is that cryptocurrency, while it is one part of it, the underlying technology, blockchain, while we can't separate the two completely, has a lot of benefits that can, take us to where we're trying to get to. And I think it's only a matter of time before we get there. And I see even the largest of the large banks making strides towards this. They're embracing this technology. They're learning about it. They're building teams within themselves to basically research and develop more on this technology. So I think it's only a matter of time.
So getting back on what he's talking about is that the transition may take longer, but it has to happen. There isn't a way around it. Explain to us where we are in that transition. How far in are we into that transition, and how much longer could it take for an average citizen to experience blockchain?
Yeah, tough to answer how longer, but a good answer can be in terms of where we are talking about. So technology we adopted, for example, and then comes the next phase of the ease. Why are we doing all this? If we go back, it's more to do with ease of business, right? Ease for us as a consumer, ease for corporates, ease for the governance, ease for the way currency fluctuates and process it, right? The value will bring the change faster. So one, I fairly see we need to understand the difference between hype. So today everywhere, and being digital, it's very fast to get the information to us. So that hype and the reality of these things need to be understood. Second, from financial segment where it is primarily related, and then to other segment, as Nikhil said, you can utilize these things in manufacturing, on the way the systematic things learn and get these technologies in. With that value chain, totally in sync with the way we see that it has to be a little bit tweaked, but it is going to come. How soon, it depends upon the adoption rate. For example, how soon we adopted mobile? Is it something the smartphones were evolved 10 years and then we absorbed it? Or is it something the way the telcos came in and the cheaper call rates came in, the applications came in, we moved to cloud and then slowly found out everything is on my hand. So there are 2 or 3 parameters which are going to define it. Definitely I believe it's a government initiative which needs to look into. You can't have that rotation. The regulation, the way we say from an RBI perspective, what we can do or not, and they're doing a lot of initiatives as well. And they're doing their due diligence in terms of data, in terms of currency, in terms of fluctuation, underlying economy, how to eliminate that. So yes, right, there is a faster chance. We are moving fast. We are ahead. We are not the last ones, right? No comparison in terms of the larger region, China, or in terms of other regions, how it floats around. But we are seeing the exponential growth and the changes in terms of transaction, the way business happens. So if this is the way, cryptocurrency with a tweaking, with the right modes can be there. How Bitcoin is seen in India, how we can do it. Today we can't even track, for example, or we don't know how to track as a consumer, but I know how to do my banking. So there is a learning curve which is missing. Where it comes from the initiatives of finance sectors, the way they have allowed us to operate. Today I go to a bank and he says that you are on bank on the phone. Still he goes to an application and say, can you change your passwords to 4-digit pins? Then he said, why are you doing it? Why don't you do a touch? So next time I go to the same bank, see the evolution in that same app. Now I touch and I logged in and say, why are you getting into it? Even you could have done that on the go, right? So that evolutions is bringing ease to me. I can't control the governance altogether, but the government understand from the corporate world, from finance world, it is not a timeline of few years. Sure. You are seeing a change today and tomorrow.
Sure. I was looking at a phone the other day. It was built in India, but it was designed by a company in the UK. And the phone took a combination of your fingerprint, face recognition, and retina to kind of decide how you would log into the system and do your transaction. It was built for a UK company. So certainly moving in that direction, more security, and then split up servers to be able to decide on what that is going to be. Thank you, Deepak. Thank you, Nikhil. We are going to continue this discussion. As we're taking questions in, we will meet again in about 5 minutes from now. So send in your questions, and thank you for joining us for this discussion. Welcome back to the 12th edition of ThinkTalks at AmityOnline. We've been talking both with Deepak Talwar from ENY and Nikhil Joy from Zest Money about cryptocurrencies, about blockchain, about banking, and what's the future. We're taking a set of questions now from people who have been watching this online session, and we want to talk about what the challenges are as we move forward. We'll also bring up a few more areas of concern and how we can move forward, both with Deepak, who specializes in cybersecurity, and Nikhil, who runs a platform which does e-lending on a platform. So the first question which has come in to us is, how can we tackle cyber fraud instances so as to give confidence to customers to confidently use digital banking? You want to take that, Deepak?
Yeah, I'll give a try. It's a question to be looked. If we see it as an consumer, I use my phone for various things. I use my computers for various things. I go to office. I come back to home, log into my Wi-Fi or connect. I'm connected, first of all. I'm digital, second. Am I aware? So before we talk about how do we combat with the cyber frauds and all, many a times when you log into any application or you do a web net banking, I'm sure we all have recognized and seen there are a lot of things don't do, do's and don'ts. Less education, or being educated but not going through a couple of things, or at least bringing that in our habits, is one basic from a learning perspective I would like to bring on this platform. That's point number one. And this goes without say, whether it is corporate, you being in office trying to being disciplined how you're utilizing things, you're a consumer going as an individual doing banking on the way, and you are talking on moving in a lift and saying, hey, what, can you book my ticket? Hello, can you book? And then you all of a sudden started giving a lot of information while surroundings are there. So misleading informations, the informations in a corrective way, and measures. Now coming to the corporate side of it. When we talk about corporate and the way digital banking, if we say, or payment gateways, there are responsibilities, equal responsibilities on each side of it. You see the banking, the way they invest money in technologies and cybersecurity is humongous, and there is a reason to it, right? They understand the third parties, the payment gateways, and then the transaction happening with the consumer. So I am the owner of my phone, but I am being fully, being infected. That's my side of it, because I was not taking care of it. But once you do an online transaction and you move to an online from a phone and you're doing a payment gateway, we have seen that example in our earlier talk. He did not got a second message, and he was not having an OTP, though it's, as I keep saying, it's a traditional way, we don't have to do it now. But with those mechanisms, you need those technology, point number one. You need a more awareness as a platforms, how they are operating from a corporate level. Blockchain as an example, why we say it is more secure, and machine learning, user behavior analytics. Why are we talking about it? Because if you see from a cyber standpoint, they are changing the way the technologies can control and maybe more secure. So the corporate responsibility, the banking responsibility, the consumer responsibility can get into.
So what you're saying, Deepak, is that people will always be able to trust an entity far greater when the larger entity is involved.
And more secure.
And more secure.
Yes.
And that is where the challenge is going to be.
Yes.
So the next question is, are digital payments immune to cyber thefts? How do you?
Well, long story short, no. I mean, nothing is immune. But having said that, as technology progresses, it gets more difficult. So an OTP would be more secure than a static password. Biometric would be infinitely more secure than an OTP, right? So it's all about how the technology progresses and how it's being adopted. But see, we briefly spoke about this earlier as well. As technology gets more sophisticated, so do the fraudsters, right? So I think it's very important that that people are literate about how some of this underlying technology works. I mean, take a very common example. I mean, we get messages from our bank saying that you should never share your OTP or passwords with anyone, even if it's a bank employee, right? And most of us see this but ignore it. I mean, a lot of my family members, I've noticed them repeating the OTP or their secure password on the phone with a phone banking professional. I mean, so it's all about getting it out there that however much technology evolves, you have to be literate on what you need to do and what you shouldn't do.
Bring this to a very good point about the large illiteracy that we see. And is this population that is illiterate, is it capable of actually using technologies like the blockchain? Now, what I see when I see, traditional mobile banking even today, my mother would not use digital banking. She's 80 something. What I also see is that she's not going to use e-banking on a computer. So she will go traditionally to a bank. Similarly, I work in a village. Every weekend I work in a village not far away from Delhi. And in that village, none of those people, almost none of them, even if they want to use their e-banking solution, they go to a service provider. They pay him money to use and he uses it for them. So will blockchain actually bring more ability for people to use, end users to be able to use the technology? So we may not have been able to use the e-banking, but will that illiterate customer, and I don't mean illiterate in terms of education, I just mean not wanting to be illiterate, will they be able to use blockchain?
It's a mindset. And before that, blockchain is still far ahead with the word saying the literacy or seeing India as from an education or even going from a remote the way we started with. So let's go back. If you're at an area where the connectivity is an issue, an area where mobile itself is still new, smartphone still it's a name, right? Though we are doing best of to take those transformation not just to urban, to the rural areas or to the remote locations. So infrastructure, the basic hygiene which is required to run these things, and there is something on those technology called as known and unknowns. We also have to realize when we talk about these advanced technologies, the unknowns are the complexity of establishing them, the installations, the implementation, the use case of how it is related or relevant. As you said, we are talking about illiteracy in terms of not adopting. If I take that word, then we are talking that people are educated but being not the right way, but we still say that is this something they are not adopting because of an hindrance? Is it something they are insecure, or is it something they are not aware, right? So yes, there will be some benchmarking from both sides. So if it is a ease of adoption, I easily get a phone, I easily get a connectivity, and then it's a matter of just learning, your family can do it better. So let me tell you, a generation older and a newer generation, we have spoken in the morning about it, both are talking, right? FaceTime, eye to eye, face to face, the way they want to talk. Is this the same thing happening earlier? Answer is no. So we are not seeing only the next generation, even if it is the ease or a touch, not only in terms of banking, but touch to a human being, right? And artificial intelligence, I was saying that it is changing the way humans into robotics. It's a saying. People call it as a threat as well. It's not. It's not. Everything you need to adopt and learn with time, right? But what I'm saying is, yes, from a rural side, from an uneducated sector to an uneducated or illiterate in terms of not being adopting, it's more in a scalability in terms of how you absorb it, how early you take it, it is in my benefit. And at the same time, as long as these technology who are building it up, the organizations who are into it, make it more ease, not less complex in terms of deployment and implementation.
So it really brings us to the next question which has just come in. What measures are being taken towards trust building of consumers for digital payments?
So I think the regulator and the government generally are doing great things with this regard. So I'll briefly talk about some of the initiatives that the government are running that sort of gives comfort to the consumers when using some of these technologies. So India Stack, which comprises of UPI, eKYC, and say a consent layer. These are initiatives started by the government, which facilitates ease of transaction. So eKYC, for instance, lets you open a bank account or get a mobile phone connection just by using your biometrics. And as we know, biometrics are more secure than a password or other means of encryption. So definitely there is a push from the government. The regulators also making great strides in educating the consumer more. And even if you look at technology like UPI, I think the bulk of the success can be attributed to the fact that the government itself is investing in bringing more people onto the system, educating them on how to use it, on the benefits of using it, right? So definitely, I think we're going in the right direction.
The next question is for you, Deepak, already. Is cryptocurrency really a bubble, or is it going to burst, or is it going to stay?
Something
One
comes
word.
tough to you as well. As we say, cryptocurrency is a medium. There's a technology behind it. From an organization perspective, from a country perspective, from a worldwide, the way adoption perspective, these all are not just today. They are evolving. Point number one. Second, as we keep saying, the technology evolution and the velocity and the frame it has to come into it. It's more to do with how faster the end users, the clients, the corporates see the value into it, right? So is cryptocurrency here to stay? Difficult to answer. I would avoid that as of now. But is there a width? Is there a value the way business sees into it, especially the banking? The answer is yes. If the right governance, the right regulations, and the right mix of technologies are going around it, and we see there is less of threat, the way we have seen in other countries why they are not adopting. Needless to say, there are reasons. And also from the learning side of those who are adopting it, why there is a higher values of Bitcoin? Why? Is it a bubble? Or somebody who is also transacting? Let's go back and do a little bit of search. If we are, that same category of unlearned mode, and we try to find out and say the way we are doing trading today in India or even at a global scale. How do we do those tradings, right? On a benchmark or a dollar or an IR. How is this technology is going to decrease the time? Point number one. The number of transactions and the trading and processing, the way it happens virtually, will be 100 times, 1000 times, right? With those things, the multiplier will be higher. If the returns are also higher, the processes are also higher, chances are people are seeing profitability, the value to it, then yes. But can we say yes without the governance, without the regulations, without somebody thinking the way we have thought that there has to be a regulation today? I brought that point earlier, right? General protection, right? General data, right? So with general data protection regulations made from a European side and then coming here, it's more to do with data privacy, right? More to do with your information, more to do with the consent to be taken, right? Acknowledgement, and so on and so forth, right? With those things, now we are stabilized. So with that governance practice, right regulations, and we see the value, and banking gives the right way. RBI trying to think cryptocurrency in terms of don't do it or do it, there must be reasons to it. Right. But with time, Rohit, yes, the answer is if it goes in the right direction and we see that value, it is going to evolve.
It's going to evolve and it's here to stay. In 2005, I was having a discussion with somebody who brought in a lot of this technology into India and the whole IT business into India. And I said, what is one industry that you'd open? He said, I'd open a bank with 5 employees. And it was a server bank, right? We looked at it in 2005 and said, really? That's far ahead, and will it ever happen? Today, we see a lot of these e-banks in place. So I think one has to see and look at these technologies as the future, understand what their bandwidth is, understand the world's investment into it. It's not like one little computer which has been made. There are tens and thousands of people that back it and then put it together. So as long as we understand that here's a technology that can be used and is being used, and how we will make sure that our regulations incorporate it. We're looking at e-banking, transactions, at a far more higher safety level. We're looking at it in a more futuristic manner, that we'll be able to bring value to a nation like ours, especially with such high illiteracy rates. When I say illiteracy, I mean e-illiteracy. So thank you, Nikhil. Very fruitful discussion. Thank you,
you,
Deepak.
Rohan.
Thank
It
you.
really is
Thank you,
important to talk about what the future holds for us. And thank you, AmityOnline, for giving us this opportunity to talk about the blockchain, e-banking, and the future of banking in India.